Uh, there's an for you. Today, jeez, we are going to talk more about models today, and we will do that in the console. So to get into the console, we go to the tools, the RubyMine, and say Run Rails Console. That opens up the IRB-like console that we can play with. And this is probably one of the most valuable tools in Rails. When I'm developing Rails on the outside, I keep a console open all the time just to play with it, just to see, okay, what would happen if I did this? How do I get the value out of this particular model? And I can do it right in the console and figure it out, and then I take that code over to my view or wherever I'm going to put it. So I created a couple more recipes, and the recipe model is how I start. That's a class that is mapped to the table in the database. The recipe is a table, a complete table of all the records that I have in my database. So if I say recipe.all, that's a way of retrieving all of the records from my recipe table. A record is a row in the table. So if I say recipe.all, it returns it in, can you tell what type of data is returned here?
Hash.
It's an array of what? Of recipe objects. So it's a lot like when we created a character. We could have created a bunch of characters and put them into an array. But the object that's stored in the array is a character object, in this case a recipe object. So I can assign a variable to maybe say all recipes. Recipe.all. Now all recipe is what type of data?
String.
No. It's an array. So if I say .class, it tells me I've got to use the right. Yep. I have to say all recipes.class is an array. If I just type it out here, you can see it starts with a bracket here. And then I have a couple of objects. I created one this morning. I have two recipes, recipe 1, recipe 2, and I have Dave's mac and cheese as my second recipe value here. So how would I get the first recipe in this all recipes array? All right, that's one way to do it. I could say all recipes, since it's just an array, what would be the first element in the array? Sub-0, okay? That gives me what type of an object? A recipe object, okay? So if I were to say .class on this, it comes back and tells me it's a recipe class, a recipe object, and these are the attributes that are mapped to the columns in my database. So I have an integer column for my ID. I've got a string column, which is the name, a serves, which is an integer, and so these are all the columns in my record. It has all those attributes associated with it. So I could say a specific one like ribs equals recipe sub. Let's see. I could go back to my all recipes sub-0, and now ribs is what type of an object? All right, good. So ribs.class gives me recipe. I can say ribs.name. And notice how RubyMine automatically knows I have a getter and a setter for that particular column. That's called the object relational mapping. So I could say ribs.name equals Dave's ribs. That's the string that's stored in there. If I say ribs.serves, it tells me it serves 4. So all of that data, I don't have to do select statements. I don't have to assign variables to each of these. It does it all for me automatically when I create this model. That is just really nice.
So is the methods like finding recipes by ingredients, were those all pre-generated?
Those are generated, those are called dynamic methods that are generated by Rails when the model is created. So, yeah, we haven't got to the find bys, those. You've probably read about those. But I can say ribs.ingredients. Tells me all the ingredients for my ribs. If I want to look at my cheese, I can assign a variable cheese, and I can say recipe dot last. These are some more methods that work on a model directly. And if you're just wanting to play with a particular record, with any record, the first and last methods are really useful to get something to play with. It's like, how would you generate the, well, how would you generate the SQL for that? Well, we do a select recipes.star from recipes. We order by recipes.id. We order by the ID in a descending order, and we limit it by 1. That's a SQL command to get the last record in a database. That you guys should all be able to write that in your sleep, right? Right. Writes it for you, right? So now my cheese is what type of an object? It's a recipe object. I want you to keep remembering that. So I can say cheese.name, Dave's mac and cheese. Isn't that great? That's just cool stuff. So let's play with this and take it into the view a little bit. In my recipes, remember last week I showed you the picture that had a dotted line between the view and the model, how I could go and get straight from the model without having to go through the controller. So let's see how to do that. If I want to print out something, I can say recipe.first. That would give me what type of an object? A recipe object, good. And I'll just say inspect. All right? So if I reload my recipes controller, it's going to load that view. It's going to go to the recipe model and get me a representation of that record in the database. Cool, eh? So I could also say, I just want the name. And this is not normally done this way, but I wanted to show you how to go straight to the model from the view here. So if I say I just want to look at the name of the first recipe in my database, I can go do that and print it in an H1 tag, and I've got Dave's ribs. Isn't that nice? How hard would that be in PHP, you guys that have had PHP?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my dear Lord, that's lots of fun.
Would have been probably about 25 lines.
Yeah, exactly. You got to create the SQL command.
Yeah.
You've got to get that, do the fetch, get the row, assign that row to a variable, and then display that on the HTML. Not fun. It's messy.
Technically, you'd have to do that if you were doing this without the Rails framework.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Rails framework does a lot of this for you, obviously.
Because like PHP does
Yeah.
something very similar to that.
Yeah.
So does Zend and Drupal, and they do a lot of this.
Yes. So to be fair, this is the framework that's doing this, not the language itself. So if I wanted to look at my next one, I could say, how would I get the next record in my database?
Recipe.last, because you only have 2.
I only got 2. I think there's a second now, which is, I believe, new in the latest Rails.
Would it be possible to do like first plus 1?
No,
Something like that?
no.
First stop.
Because what does first return?
A single row.
A single record, which is a recipe object. So I can't say recipe object plus 1.
Yeah, but don't they have an ID on them all?
Yeah, they do.
Right, but first doesn't
You
do
have to do the ID to do
Yeah, you'd have to do the ID.
the whole table, or you'd have to be able to.
So there is no second method. I thought there was. So I could say last. There we go. So, pardon me? Yes. First and the last thing, it actually, though, if I look at the database, the query here, and I look back at the database log, the server log, you should see here, if I look back far enough, this is the view doing a select recipes from recipes limit 1. That was which one? The first. And this is select recipes order by descending limit 1. That's the last. So it shows you the two select statements that it made to the database, got the data into some variables so that I can display them on the screen here. Now, obviously, this is not the way we're going to do this. But I just wanted to show you how I can go straight from the view to the model. Not a good programming practice, though. So instead, what we do is we like to put some of this data directly in the controller. So in my recipes method or my recipes action, I can assign a variable called recipes. And how would I retrieve all of the recipes from my recipe table? Capital recipe.all. All right? So that takes and gives me what type of a variable? An array of recipe objects. Okay, good. So that's an instance variable. This went out to the model, got the data, stored it back in my recipes instance variable that I can then use, and this was part of your assignment this week, how do I loop through all of my products or my recipes? So at recipe is the name, which is what type of variable again?
Instance.
It's an instance array variable. I can say dot each do, and then what is the object? A recipe. So we use the singular inside of the goalposts because that's a single recipe row, and we use plurality to show that there are multiple objects in this variable. That's just a convention that is used a lot in Rails. So then I need an in statement, and I don't need to print that out. I'm going to print out the stuff in between here. So if I want to print them all separately, I'm going to put my H1s inside of here now. And how do I print out the name? Okay, good. Recipe. I'm going to print it with my puts, my equal sign, recipe.name. And that should print out a H1 for every row in my database. Look at that. It looks the same because I calculated it all out the same. Isn't that cool? That's just really nice. How easy is that? Let's say, so now I can go into my console. Let's create a new record in my recipe table. So how do I do that? Recipe.create, and then I give it the name value pairs for each of my values that I need for, or each of my attributes for my recipe object. So the first thing, the ID is an auto increment ID, unique ID that's created by Rails, so we don't touch that one. We leave that alone. We let Rails give me the next available ID because I don't want to know what that is. I do need to know the name, and I'll use the new syntax, which is, this is the hash. The old syntax was colon, name points to a string. Dave, let's see, I'm going to call it Dave's sauce. There we go, thank you. Dave's sauce. So that's the old HashRocket way. The new Ruby 193 way is to put the colon at the end of the word, which still kind of makes it a symbol, and then the integer is going to be, that's going to serve 8. All right, ingredients. So it's a shortcut, but you'll see this in a lot of Rails generated code. So I wanted to show you the two ways to do it. Ingredients is text. made by is going to be Dave as a string. Last made is going to be a date and time string. So since I'm just creating some fake data, what's the easy way to get the current date and time? Time.now. Good. Image is going to be some string. I'm not going to put it in right now, so I'll leave it out. And then the created at and updated at are auto-generated by Rails for me, so I don't have to keep track of those or create those at all. And I have a problem. Okay, good. Undefined variable or method text. So I said ingredients as text. Right? So it's not a string. So in IRB, I did that on purpose, of course. In IRB, I can hit the up arrow key, and it brings back the last executed command, and I can go through and edit. Oops. I can edit this and say I want this to be some yummy ingredients. Some yummy secret ingredients. All right, hit return again. It does the transaction, creates the SQL for me, insert into recipes all of these values. And since I didn't put a image, it doesn't use that, and it can leave it as blank. And puts all the values in. So that's the long select statement you would have had to come up with if you're doing it out of Rails. Then I need to, unfortunately, when I did this, where did the data go? Well, in this case, it actually created it in the database, so that was a rabbit trail. Ignore what I said. That actually stored it in the database. So now when I look at recipe, count is a method that tells you how many records are in this particular table. So recipe.count tells me I have 3 now. If I reload my page, I didn't have to do anything to my view because I'm looping through all of the recipes. Isn't that sweet? It's nice.
It's not that easy in PHP.
No, it's not. This is just so nice. So, any questions on that so far? Yes? No?
Are we going to recreate the table based off of this information, the model information?
For your projects, yes. The hard-coded one's gonna go away, and you're going to create a model that has the products in it exactly like it. I have specific fields that I wanted in there. Okay. All right, let's look at some more data. So I've got the name. What else could I put in here? Let's make these, let's add a section around each of my recipes. That's an HTML5 construct. And let's add, we can call this heading now. Each section can have its own, or is it head? Heading, yes, heading. Each section now could have its own information. So I might say made by, and how would I get that data from the database? Recipe.made by. All right, good. Let's put a break tag around that. All right. Yeah, this auto. I need a percent. I lost my percent. Made by serves recipe.serves. And maybe last made recipe.lastMade. Let's see what we get now. There we go. Nice. Huh? Isn't that cool? So this UTC is not very nice. But we can there are some methods that we can use to fix that. Let's add some inline styling here. I know you guys love that. Let's do a border 1 pixel solid black around the whole thing, and some padding of 10 pixels. Nice. And we'll put some border around this. See, I'm a great stylist. Some margin, I mean, of about 10 pixels around the whole thing. Look at that's just genius. That'll win awards right there. All right. So that's a way of laying out all of the data for my table, and I only had to do one of them, and this loop is going to loop through all of the data that I have in my table. Isn't that cool? Pardon me? It's a styling. The style for heading doesn't have any styling yet. So I'd have to go into my style sheet and add something. I leave that to you guys. I could, yeah, I could just make that an H1 if I wanted. Sure. There we go. Isn't that nice? I do? Oh. Okay. So let's follow the flow. When I make a request to page/recipes, what's the first thing that gets called? Sounds like a good quiz question. In the Rails, what's the first thing that gets called if I call page/recipes? Where do I find the code for that? In the page controller. Okay, so I look in my page controller for my recipes action or method, and in here, this is where I can set some data. Like we did for my About Us, I set some instance variables, and for my products, I set this this data, which is what you guys had to do. And in this, I made a model call. So it went out to the model, got the data, did the select statements for me, queried the database, returned all of the rows as what type of variable? No. You guys always choose string. I don't know why. As an array of recipe objects. So each element in my array is a full recipe object. And then it calls the view. Once I've set all that up, goes to my view. I loop through all of my recipe objects, printing them out on the page one by one. So that's how that works. So the models are very, very nice. Now, to create the CRUD, I would have to create a form for this information, display the data in the form fields, like we're making them sticky. I would do that same thing. I'd have to have a delete method. I'd have to have an update method or an edit method. So there's a lot of different things that are very common. And so for that, we'll use scaffolding. So don't go too far ahead with this. If you try to do this manually, you'll spend a lot of time creating that data, that flow, all of those views necessary. So let's play around with some more stuff here. In the console, there's other ways I can retrieve information. I can look up data based on the ID, for instance. So if I say store it as a variable, I say recipe.find by a particular ID. So let's say I want the ID of value 2. Which one is that going to return me? My mac and cheese, right? So now my a.name is my mac and cheese. So I can specifically look at one of these records from the database. All right? Everybody see that? I can also do these special find all by, and look at all of these methods that are created for me. And the method names are based on the names of my columns. The Rails generated these methods for me automatically. So I have an actual method called find all by image, find all by ingredients, find all by last made, find all by made by. So let's do a find all by made by. And then what would I pass into this, do you think? A string, which should equal the value I'm looking for. Ah. Why did that not work? What is A? It's a recipe object. It's right. It's not the entire table. So I need to go recipe.find all by made by, and then Dave. Ta-da! Now I get back. Why do I get an array? Right. It could have multiple results because I said find all. It's going to return me an array of this information. If I just say recipe.find by made by, it does and returns the first one in the database that has my name associated with the made by. But it didn't return an array. See, this is just one object. So recipe.find by made by is one recipe object. Find all by made by, that gives me an array of all of those that it found. Do you see the difference there? Find all gives you an array. Even if it only finds one, it will return an array of that one object. So let's find all by serves. Let's see, recipe.find all by serves. And what do you think I'd put in here? Some number, right? An integer, not a string. And that would return some number of these. There's only one, it looks like. One way to find out how many it returns is I can call the count method on this. Because what is the data type at this point? An array. And so I can say array.count. That's a standard Ruby thing, method. And it gives me, I got one of those. I found one recipe that serves 4. Yeah, these are all, yes, you can do some searches. So let's look at the guides again. And you should have all read this weekend, right? The guides on the query interface. These are all the different ways that I can select information, retrieving a single object, retrieving multiple. So if I want to retrieve one, I can say where. That's a where clause, like in a select statement. Includes, those would be the ones I might use for searching all the fields. So I can look by the primary key. The primary key was created for me by Rails when I created the model. And that is what we'll use when we try to look at a particular record. Client.first, we did those last. First and last. The difference with those are they raise an error if it can't find it. The other one doesn't. That's the only difference here. Retrieving multiple objects. I can do multiple primary keys. I can pass an array of the different IDs that I want to look at, and it would return me all of those. So there's lots of ways to get at the data. This shows how we can loop through them like we did in our view. Find each would be the same thing. I can do some. Those are batch finds. If I have a million records, I don't want to pull a million records into memory at the same time. That would be a bad thing. So I do it in batches. So I pull up the first 1,000 records and then the next 1,000 records if I'm going to do that. I can do these where clauses where some value equals something. So in this case, where this column name equals something that was passed in through the params hash somehow. So let's try to do something like that where I look at a particular record and take it all the way from the routing. So if I want to look at a particular record, I can say I can store my ID, and if I want to pass that in my array, I would look it up as the ID. I'm dyslexic. All right. So if the value comes through on my routing in the params hash, I'm going to store it in the ID, and then instead of looking up all of them, I'm going to say find that particular ID. And so recipes is going to be a single object here. So that's probably going to crash, but let's look and see if we can do that without changing our routes. I think we're going to have to change that. So go back here, recipes, I could say /1, and it says no route matches that. I can't do that. So the /1 has got to be the ID. That's what I want it to look like. So let's look at my routes here. My config folder, routes folder, and let's just uncomment this one out for now because that matches anything and passes me the ID if it finds it to my action. Well, that's not. Let's do it the right way. Let's go back up to my get, my recipes, and I want it to match something like this. So I'm going to copy this. And instead of my get, I'll comment this out. And I'm going to say I want to match page / I'm going to make that required. So I take the parentheses out. / but have an optional /ID that gets passed to my action, which is going to be recipes. Okay, so it's going to match page / recipes with an optional ID at the end of it. I got too many parentheses here. Missing controller. No, I'm not.
You have to pass it into, look at your page calendar below. No, go back up. So you did a get page calendar, year, month, day.
Yeah, the match shouldn't require that though. Pause. All right, so I went back to this get way of doing it. This is similar to the calendar. I'm going to get a page controller, that recipes action, and an optional ID that gets passed. And that will be stored in the params hash as the ID element here. And then I went through the controller and the action, and this is my variable. If I want to use it in my IRB, in my views, as a recipe path or recipe URL. So if I reload this now, I get this error, which says undefined method each. So the problem with this is that I'm only getting one. So I can't recipe.each if recipe is not an array anymore, because I only got one of these guys. So if I look at my page controller, it's returning only a single recipe object. So I need to not do an each or an end and call this at recipes. We'll do this differently when we get to the scaffolding. So now the single object's name should all print out correctly here, but only as one element. All right. So it didn't find anything, so it gave me the first. Sorry. I had a 1 here, so it found me the first element in my table. Found me Dave's ribs. If I change this to 2, what's it going to get me?
Mac and cheese.
Dave's mac and cheese. Isn't that great? If I change this to 3,
Dave's sauce.
Dave's sauce. If I change it to 4,
You get an error, or nothing.
I get an error. I can't find a record with that ID. All right. Very good. So we'll do more of this tomorrow. We'll start some scaffolding tomorrow and play around with more of this data. And you'll see how easy it is to create a table in Rails.